So, welcome to the inaugural episode of the Stream Team. My name is John Santucci. Call me Tooch. I got the rest of the team here with me and a very special guest. Tonight, we are going to talk about streaming TV, of course. That's the purpose of the show. And we are going to get you ready for Amazon Prime's high fantasy series, The Wheel of Time, based on the Robert Jordan fantasy novels. And let's meet the team. We got Sarah Mars.
Hello.
Hi, Sarah. We got Aaron Mikulski.
What's up, dude?
And our special guest, Rebecca from Reading the Pattern.
Hello.
How's everyone doing?
Just here on a Sunday night waiting for this show to start. Feels like we've been hearing about it for 2 years.
We have. We actually started talking about this show in April, I think, March or April, and started preparing, StreamYard and music and video and pictures and graphics and getting ready, studying for Wheel of Time. And usually, Aaron and Sarah and I, Rebecca, we were on another podcast called I Have a Stream on the Barroom Network. And after that went down, we decided to start this one. And as soon as I heard that Amazon was adapting the Wheel of Time for serial on their streaming TV platform, I was like, I called up Aaron and I'm like, we got to do some more streaming TV. They're going to do Wheel of Time. And he was like, called me back. He's like, I got a name for the show. Let's call it the Stream Team. And then I called up Sarah and she was, let's do it. So that was how we did. We started the show. So on I Have a Stream, we used to talk about what are you watching now and how's that going for you. So how about we start with our special guest and anything else that you're watching right now that you'd want to recommend to Stream Team fans?
So I'm actually, I'm like not watching anything interesting right now. Other than, before I go to bed, I usually like to have a show that I will watch that's just like, kind of like really easy to watch. So like nothing that's like going to like captivate me too much when I'm just like needing to wind down. So that right now that I'm watching is Younger, which is streaming on Hulu. And it's kind of a fun show, but like, I don't know, it's kind of just like light and fun. The last thing that I was really into was I like binge streamed all of The Expanse and got caught up on it. So I'm excited for season 6.
Very cool. I read the first 2 or 3 books of The Expanse. I was enjoying it too. And then the show came out. I watched season 1. I kind of forgot about it after that. Did it get better? I know that's another complicated one.
I love it. I mean, I really enjoy it. But if it depends on how you feel about sci-fi, I guess, because it's definitely sci-fi. But I love it. Yeah.
Was it? Now it was on one network and moved to another.
Yeah, it was on Sci-Fi, okay. And then it moved to Prime, Amazon Prime, okay, which is where you can watch it now. And I just binge streamed it like after it was all 5 seasons that are out. I binged it, so I didn't like go over from the Sci-Fi channel. So I think there were differences, and it's cool that it made that transition. And I'm excited for the final season that's coming out soon.
Very cool. I got some catching up to do. Sarah, what are you watching now that you can recommend to me?
Well, not to be like braggy, but it's the end of the year, so I'm a film critic. So everything I'm watching is for the end of the year voting, and it's all embargoed. I think the one thing I've watched that's like streaming now is on Netflix. They have a true crime series called Catching a Killer. I think that's the name, Catching Killers. And it's interviews with the law enforcement officers and detectives who actually worked some of the biggest serial killer cases in U.S. history. They only have 4 episodes, but they're really interesting. And there's only 3 cases because there's a 2-parter on the I think it's the the happy face killer is a 2-parter. Because that involves a false confession. So that's the first episode. And then they actually get the person in the second one. So if you're a true crime fan, fan's a weird word, aficionado, murderino, if you will. It's an interesting show. It's interesting to hear from the people who actually had to do like the grunt work of just okay, we opened a tip line. We got 15,000 tips. We had to run them all down. Here's what we did. And also to see, you know, in some of these cases, 20, 30, 40 years later, that's how it still affects them. Like, it's not something that I think you don't get over it. I think if you're working one of those cases. So it's kind of interesting to see like how they're still so connected to the families and the survivors. And that's really, it's really interesting if you're at all interested in investigation and true crime. And it's easy. There's only 4 episodes. They're only an hour each. Like it's one night.
Catching Killers. Is that on HBO?
It's on Netflix.
Netflix. Okay. My wife loves that stuff. So after I get done with the show here, I will go out there and inform her. She watches all that true crime stuff. She loves it. So we're going to go over to Tormund Giantsbane of Council Bluffs, Iowa for what he's watching.
I don't have a series right now. I bounce around, and kind of the opposite of Rebecca. I'll find something in the morning that I don't have to think a lot about. I'll have my breakfast and my coffee, and I'll find something that just kind of is easy watch, and I don't have to be too terribly invested. But I guess recently the thing that I watched that sticks out, and not for the best reasons, I watched M. Night Shyamalan's movie Old. And it was bad. It was bad. And I like bad movies. It was one of those that for whatever reason, I like M. Night Shyamalan movies quite a bit. I mean, I can't even tell how many times I watched the movie Signs a year. It's one of my favorite movies. But he just big swing and a miss as far as I'm concerned. And I'm not a film critic like Sarah, and I like everything.
I didn't really like Old.
I did not like it. I literally laughed my way through the movie. Because some of the acting is so bad, some of the dialogue is terrible. Like the basic premise of the movie is there's a group of people and they end up in an area on an island that spoiler alert, if you're interested in watching it, then maybe pause for a second, but they start aging rapidly. And obviously they don't know why. And there's just one line, and it's pretty obvious what's happening. And then there's one line where the mom looks at the kid and just says, "You're getting older," and then like stops. And it's just like some of the dialogue and just the acting, it's terrible. There's some over the top stuff that I think was supposed to be scary. Sarah, you know what I'm talking about with the lady in the tunnel?
Yeah, M. Night Shyamalan is. To me, he's in this class of filmmakers, not unlike J.J. Abrams, where they have great big ideas. And then you just desperately want someone else to execute the script. They can even write the first draft, like the second draft, give them a writing credit. Don't care. But just get someone else in there to like polish it off and sort of smooth everything out and punch up the dialogue because they're not as good at the dialogue as they think they are. So, it's one of those things that I thought Old, like the idea was really good.
100%. Yeah.
And it could have been like really creepy and weird.
Yep.
But it just, and maybe it was pandemic execution. They shot it during the pandemic. The challenges that productions are facing during the pandemic, I feel like everything kind of needs to be graded on a curve because they're dealing with a lot behind the scenes. So maybe there was some of that mixed in, but it just was one of those movies where I'm just like, ugh, the idea is there. And then the execution just kind of, the further in it goes, we have a commenter saying it got old by the second act, which is great pun. We get it. But like, it's true. The longer the movie goes on, it just wears really thin. And the twist, like not one of his better twists. So
no, it was even the twist, like the rest of the movie, the twist could have been cool. Like I said, like you said, the premises was great. And if it had been executed better, it was like, it just, I don't know, for whatever reason, like I said, swing and a miss, it had a good chance. And I like just about anything M. Night Shyamalan does, but for just Old did not do it for me. It was not my thing.
Yeah.
I like the comment from Noel. Old got old by the second act.
Yeah.
But that's the case with a lot of his, although he made that movie just a few years ago, The Visit, with the grandparents, which I thought was like, oh, it's sort of M. Night returning to form. Like it's a simple, clear-cut idea that when you get to the twist, everything sort of takes on that second meaning. And there's like, you want to rewatch the movie to see what you can catch out of it. And then he just immediately nosedived right after that.
What was that one movie called? I haven't heard that one.
It's The Visit or Visitors.
Visitors?
Okay, it's from, I want to say
it's
2017-ish.
Okay, I'll check that out then.
Right. Has he made a good movie in a while?
Well, that one is legitimately good.
Okay.
And I thought the one with James McAvoy, Split,
Yeah,
was also like
scary.
pretty good. It got a little silly in parts, but McAvoy's acting was amazing. Anya Taylor-Joy was amazing. And then of course the franchise hookup was just the pits, just the worst, absolutely awful. Hated it.
Yeah, I loved it. Like I said, I'm one of the people why they make bad movies, but I mean, James McAvoy's acting was so good that actually Samuel L. Jackson said that it was freaky watching him switch in between characters so crazy like that.
But that's only this much of the movie. There's all this other stuff that's not that interesting.
That's fair. Glass, I think it was called, wasn't it?
And yes, I think it was Glass. But that's kind of the thing with M. Night Shyamalan is I often wish, besides the fact that I kind of have that idea of like, you probably needed someone else passing on your scripts to make them sort of top tier, is he moves into things so quickly that it's kind of like, dude, take your time. Like, take a little bit more time, do a few more passes on the script, like think things through a little bit more. Like, could you come up with a better finale, for instance?
It's like he comes up with the twist before the movie, and then
sure
like tries to build this, like, oh, what if this happens, and like tries to piece it together before that.
I'm absolutely sure that's what's happening.
Yeah.
And that's fine. Like, that's sometimes you have to work backwards from the solve. But it's more about like, and it's like, of course, M. Night Shyamalan, like, he is a really good filmmaker, which is why I'm often like, dude, just take your time. Like, if you need another year to hammer out the script and like get everything polished to the max and
Game
like,
of Thrones,
figure things out, like, it's fine.
Right.
It's fine.
All right. Well, I recently watched Shang-Chi. I enjoyed it a lot. A couple series I'm watching: Foundation and Invasion. Both those are on Apple TV, and enjoying those as well. Before we get into, we've got a lot of people in the chat room. We have not missed any Wheel of Time stuff, so we're about to get started. Going to set the table for Wheel of Time right here with our special guest, Rebecca. Basically, let me pull up some stuff here. The Wheel of Time, 15 fantasy novels written by this guy, Robert Jordan. I love this picture.
It's a classic.
It's really really cool, but unfortunately Robert Jordan passed away before he could finish, so the series was finished by this guy.
Yeah, that tracks.
Brandon Sanderson, which I gotta tell you, Rebecca, I love the ending of Wheel of Time. I thought it was one of the best endings of any like books I've read. Really enjoyed it, and I gotta tell you, I did not really miss any. I didn't notice a change in voice or tone between Jordan and Sanderson. So if
I think it was only really noticeable in some like specific character POVs in the first book that he co-wrote, which was book 12, The Gathering Storm, as there were some character POVs that I think at least enough fans were, Matt in particular, people noticed the difference, but he kind of corrected that, I would say, after that book. So he did a wonderful
thought he did
job.
a great job. There's a lot of Rebecca stands in the chat room. So just FYI, your fans have come along. Appreciate them.
Readers.
Come along. Let's talk about the Wheel of Time. The world of Wheel of Time is so huge. I worry that a condensed version may not satisfy fans of the novels, and that's probably expected. That's the elephant in the room. If you were gonna say tell the uninitiated 3 things that they should know about Wheel of Time, what do you think you'd choose?
Yeah, that's
a tough question. I'm putting you
definitely
on the spot.
super hard to condense it down to that. I mean, one thing I would
Yeah.
say is that I think not every fantasy world out there does, but Wheel of Time does, is the way the magic system is really very built into the whole concept of the story. So it's not just like, there are characters who can do magic and it's like hand wavy and the magic is there, for certain plot elements or whatever. But in Wheel of Time, it's like really baked into the whole concept, and it informs so much of what the story does. And so I think that that's kind of an important thing for people to realize, that like if you're coming to this from Game of Thrones, where magic is not a huge factor, it's much more political, that I mean, Wheel of Time has that too. So if you like all that political drama, it's there, but I think magic is more significant than it was in Game of Thrones.
That's
So it's
actually
more
really exciting
interesting.
to hear, because I think for a lot of people, the magic in Game of Thrones, the mystery of what are these creatures, what's going on
Yes.
with these patterns, like people got hooked on that. And then when that turned out to be a red herring, essentially, it was
Totally.
nothing, it didn't matter.
Mhm.
That's when people started getting really let down. So if Wheel of Time, because, well, I can't talk about it, but the idea of the magic actually being critical to what's happening and not just window dressing is promising. That's, for me as a non-reader and not a super high fantasy person,
Mhm.
that's a hook. Like I can get into that.
That's cool, because I think, some people who are into that are, worry like, oh, people coming over from Game of Thrones that weren't expecting that, like, is it off-putting to people? So that's kind of cool to hear that, actually. And I think you're right about how kind of knowing that there's a payoff to something makes it more interesting. And so that would maybe be the second thing I would say, is that Robert Jordan was absolutely masterful at like developing this long game story over these massive books from the beginning. If you go back, lots of people aren't going to do this, but just, if you were someone who to read the series and then go back and reread it after you'd finished it, you would in book 1 pick up on countless things that you missed the first time. It's all these little bits of foreshadowing. So he was really meticulous in that way. And so, I mean, we don't know how they're going to take that and run with it in the show, but that material is there, so there is payoff for all of these things, these little seeds that he planted from book 1.
The world is absolutely massive. I know I would love to go back and reread the books, having read through them one time, all 15 of them. But I think I'd have to do it on a beach somewhere in retirement at this point in my life. I think that would lend itself to it. But I plan on doing that. I got a lot of books on my shelf. I have a massive collection of science fiction and fantasy books, and read all the Game of Thrones, read all the Lord of the Rings. I'm hoping, like I like the comment that's up on the screen right now, that there's I hope that they are extras, like a DVD set extras, where people can get a little bit more out of them. A lot like the extended versions of Lord of the Rings.
Absolutely. I don't know if you guys saw, but this was news that the official show account just put out. They are doing little animated shorts. They're little extra features for each episode in the season.
Wow.
And each one goes into some aspect of the history of, this world. And so, for people who are coming into it not knowing anything, if you're like, okay, I'm really curious, but like there's like this whole world here and I don't understand all of it, they're adding those features. So that's, for people who want it, that's really cool.
Excellent. For me, I've talked to these two, before, trying to like tell them about the world, but it's just like, look, this is way too big for us. So I mean,
I think that hopefully the people on the show, they know that, right? Like, and they're, hopefully going about it with the idea of like, okay, let's like ease people into some of these things. And it's, it's that way in the book too, right? Like in book 1, you don't need to know all this like depthy things about the world. Like it's hinted at, but
right.
You don't need it to understand the basic story. And you start to get little bits of it. And as time goes on, you get more. So But the third thing I think that people should know is that, even though we're going on and on about like, the magic and the world and how in-depth and intricate it is, in the heart of this story is the characters, for me. And I think that needs to be the same in the show as well, that there are so many characters and really well-developed, really interesting stories. This is not one person's story. So that one fascinating thing I find about the Wheel of Time fandom is pick any character. There's tons of characters. Pick any one character, even the character who has the most, featured time in the books. You will find some fans who hate that character, who just don't like that particular character, but still love it. And then I think these characters are so in-depth and flawed and real that you're going to hate some of them maybe because that person just like pushes your buttons. But then there'll be like 10 other ones that you absolutely adore. So it's about the journey of the characters, and you don't have to love all of them to love the world and the story.
Sure. There weren't any characters that I disliked other than the villains, I think.
Yeah.
But,
same. Because I really enjoy like that complexity to the characters. They're all flawed, but it's just human nature, right? There's certain flaws that a person has that might push a particular person's buttons. So that may be why that particular character might not resonate for a person. But that's what I find fascinating. Like, how many series do you find out there where you have like really dedicated fans who just really don't like one of the characters, but still love it because there's so many rich characters that you can get invested in.
is there in the background, is there any thought as to maybe being afraid that fans might be disappointed in the series?
Oh, sure.
Or do you expect disappointment?
So for some people, absolutely, because there's a huge and diverse fandom out there. And I think you literally can't please everyone. And the success of the show also doesn't rely on just, trying to please, every existing fan there is. It's about, finding a broader audience and bringing new fans into it. I trust and believe that, there are people at the heart of the show that are book fans themselves and know it deeply and want to stay true to the heart of the books and make a successful show. So that, makes me as a longtime fan feel good. But there are some fans out there who I think just don't really, maybe even don't even love the idea of adaptations, don't really like embrace the idea of adaptations and what they are. And so, yeah, they will be disappointed because if they find themselves getting upset over the fact that Tom Maryland plays a guitar instead of a harp, and that if something like that is like really triggering to you and that's very upsetting to you, then yeah, you're probably going to be disappointed with the show because there are things that have to change.
Right. I wonder, I haven't seen, unlike Sarah, I haven't seen any of the episodes yet, but I wonder if it will be talked about as something separate from the books, much like Game of Thrones was. Hey, this is,
I have
a lot
to
of stuff
say,
changed.
Like, critical opinion, that's what you want. You
Mhm.
want the adaptation to live on its own.
Right.
In an ideal circumstance, the best adaptations become their own thing, and fans of the original source can embrace it, can love it, can
Yeah.
engage with it, but it can have its own whole fandom existing outside of that.
Absolutely.
Adaptations tend to struggle when they can't work on their own. So I mean,
totally agree. And I also, in World, there's an explanation for this. That's the beautiful thing about Wheel of Time. So, the concept of the Wheel of Time in the books is that time is circular. And the Wheel of Time keeps turning, and so there's 7 ages, and they repeat. So we're in the 3rd age, and the 3rd age will come and pass, and we'll go to the 4th, and we'll come back around to the 3rd age again. And so that's the concept of it. And so it gives you a very beautiful and simple way of thinking about the show, which is that this is a different turning of the wheel. There's one turning of the wheel that happened in the books, and when the age comes around again, a lot of the major things are the same, but lots of details are different. And so it gives a in-world canon explanation for why this isn't exactly like the books. It's a different turning.
Right. The Wheel of Time. I was going to ask you, what is the Wheel of Time? Did a good job. And the pattern, of course, is what the wheel weaves. The threads of the pattern are the lives of everyone that lives in the world.
Right.
Some threads more important than others, I take it. It's been a long time since I've read the books. But
so you're right. You said that right. The Wheel of Time weaves the pattern of an age, and the pattern is made up of threads, which are people's lives. And then,
Right.
yes, there can be people who are more important, and those people sort of guide the pattern, or the
Sure.
pattern is focused around those people more than others.
Right, and reincarnation plays
Mhm.
a large part in the novels as characters from different ages are reincarnated into the new age as different people.
Mhm.
And let's talk about the magic. And I was trying to explain channeling or side in and side R to these other two because they haven't read the books. But I was trying to explain it as like the Force from Star Wars. I don't know if that works, but
Yeah,
I did separate it into male and female. But I mean, you'll do a better job than.
Okay, so I'll give it my shot. So yeah, so the one power is it is the sort of force of magic in the world. That's what it's called, the one power, and it's what supposedly turns the wheel. And there are channelers, human beings who are able to access the one power, have that ability either inborn in them, that they will touch the power and be able to use it, whether they want to or not. And then some people can learn, and then some people can't. They just don't have the ability.
Some people can't do it at all.
Right. Some people cannot. And for whatever reason, and again, this is built into what happens. It's not arbitrary, but the one power is divided into two halves, and men who can channel access one half, and women who can channel access the other half. And this becomes important because of a major historical event that really changed things. I don't know if you want me to get into that or not, but
I did tell them. Go ahead, Aaron.
Well, I'm kind of curious, like, because he said that the more the guys use it, it's bad. I'd like to know.
Yeah, let me explain that a little bit.
Yeah,
more, 'cause
please do.
It's really, that is important to know. So about 3,000 years before the events of the books begin, I'm not going to go into like too much detail about what happened, but basically, there's the force of evil in the world they call the Dark One, and this power became known. The Dark One became, people became aware of him. We're calling him, that's just sort of a convention, but so there was a threat from the Dark One, basically, and people disagreed about how they were going to handle it. And ultimately what happened was a group of men, about 100 men, went to deal with it in their way. And when that happened, those male channelers, that affected their half of the power. Saidin became corrupted, they're calling it in the show,
Okay.
by the Dark One. So ever since that moment, 3,000 years before, the male half of the power has been corrupted. And so any man who then channels it comes in contact with this corruption from the Dark One. And the more he uses it, the more that corruption affects him. And he will eventually, maybe quickly, maybe after a long time, go mad. It will affect his mind. And so then what happened was this happened 3,000 years before, and all these men all of a sudden, had their power corrupted, and they went mad all at once and almost destroy the world. And the event was called the Breaking. So then ever since then, men aren't
supposed to. It was a period of
channel.
high technology too, as well, wasn't it? Like
Yes.
with, after that world collapsed, it went into a more primitive sort of medieval world, which I found fascinating.
That's also important and interesting, because people think of fantasy as like, medieval, like European, high fantasy. And that's not what this world is. It's sort of like a post-apocalyptic world. Imagine,
Right.
a society that was, sort of much further advanced than we are, that then collapses, and the world is broken literally, and people are scattered, and cultures are mixed, and knowledge is lost.
I kind of put it up to if anybody's seen Into the Badlands. Kind of, sort of, is what I kind of. It's basically it's the world existed, and then some kind of catastrophe happened, and the thing with that show is there's no guns, but you can see they show like remnants of your like an automobile, and like cars are like really rare. So it's kind of you can tell that their society exists after some kind of a collapse.
Right.
Right. And
But wait, let me just get this.
Yeah, go ahead.
clear. So 3,000 years ago,
Mhm.
men ruined everything. And
It is more complicated than that.
3,000 years later, the ladies are still cleaning up the mess.
Yeah.
That's I did want to bring that
More
up.
or less.
More or
That
less.
was- yeah.
There is
I love
definitely an element of that. Definitely. I mean, I
Yeah.
will say, to be fair, it's more complicated, but I don't want to get into all the details because that's part of, learning, that'll come out in the course of it. But yeah, there's
Yep.
a reason why in the current time, women are in power throughout much of the world. And, there's a different kind of gender divide than what we're used to seeing, but there's a reason for it.
Right. So the dark one is kind of like the force of evil. I think they called it Shaitan.
Yeah,
Is
you're
that
not supposed
correct?
to say that, but yes.
Okay. I don't know how
Oh,
much of
he
that
who will not be
carry, but-
named.
That's
Okay.
a Voldemort. I was
He
gonna say
will
the
not be
Voldemort thing, right?
Right.
Well, Shaitan came first, so I mean, sorry, J.K. Rowling.
Sure.
Kind of
Well,
Right.
well, yeah, but Voldemort's more
sounds like
knowable.
An
I guess,
analog
yeah.
for Satan. But
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like the Arabic word shaitan, which is Satan. So-
Right.
Yes, and Robert Jordan was known for like borrowing from all kinds of cultures around the world and kind of blending them. So I mean, that was not accidental. Absolutely, that's where that came from.
I love the way that Robert Jordan describes channeling in the books as sort of a feeling of ecstasy.
Yeah,
It can overwhelm you, and that's exactly what happens to the men. Now it's tainted.
Mhm.
They drink of it so much, the ecstasy so much that it drives them mad. Women are able to control
so
their
that's a really good point actually that I hadn't brought up. And Rosamund Pike, who's playing the lead character Moiraine, talks about this really eloquently about how Robert Jordan like describes channeling as sort of like a drug. That it's dangerous in that way. Like it's
Yeah.
so wonderful. The feeling of channeling and holding the power is so wonderful that there's always a temptation to touch it more than you should, to draw too much. And if you aren't careful, you can draw too much of the power and kill yourself, or like you can lose your ability to channel. And so there's that seductiveness to it, the risk of it. And so it explains why men who are able to channel don't just, because you can just be like, okay, well, just stop channeling, right? If you're going to go mad, if you do it, then just stop doing it. Well, it's not that easy because it is something that is extremely seductive.
So it's like another show, Supernatural. If anybody's seen Supernatural, it turns out that one of
Love
the
that
Winchester
show.
brothers has demon blood. And he finds out and he starts using the power and can't stop using the power. But the more he uses his demon powers, the more and more he loses his soul. So it's kind of the same thing.
I don't know if
Yeah,
I'll ever
there's
get through all
some similarities
15
there.
seasons of Supernatural, but I still love that show.
You read 15 books and you can't get through 15
I'm trying.
seasons of a TV show, bro.
Supernatural's one. I pull out Supernatural when I'm like, God, I don't know. I just finished a series. I can always pull it in at any time.
Yeah,
So,
I'm just saying Supernatural, a show versus 15 books. Like,
right.
yikes.
There's people are talking about the casting of the show. Of course, star
Yeah.
power brought to us by Rosamund Pike, who plays Moiraine. And someone said she's too tall. I mean, it's funny because in the book, Robert Jordan described her as tiny.
Mhm.
I think she was like 5 feet tall, probably.
Yeah,
and
That's the
something like
stuff.
dark hair.
Don't get hung up on that. Don't let
Right.
that
Yeah, I'm
throw
not-
in that. That's like the people who bitched about Hugh Jackman being too
Being
tall.
too
to play
tall.
Wolverine.
I was
Tall
about to,
Wolverine,
that was my
exactly.
exact thing I was
Like,
going to
no,
bring
come
up.
on, like,
instead of
don't-
being
Yeah.
tall
Those
Wolverine.
are the details that you just let go.
Right.
Right.
People don't seem to like learn from this, right? Hugh Jackman is a great example. Like, I mean, people complain about casting for Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones, and it's like, you know what? They actually did a fantastic job. So
Yeah. Well, and the thing about Rosamund Pike, and I know she's best known for playing these like really bitchy characters like Amazing Amy and Gone Girl. And if you haven't seen it, there is a movie on Netflix called I Care a Lot. And she
Yes.
plays one of the most morally revolting villains. But she's fantastic. She's so good. But even when she's
Yes.
playing those characters, I think she's ideal for something like this because this is going to be a hard in for a lot of people. Rosamund Pike is very accessible.
Yeah.
It's why her playing unlikable characters works so well because even when you don't like her character as a performer, she is so accessible to the audience that she can bring you in despite that lack of warmth, if you will.
yeah.
Which is not like the case with Moiraine at all. I'm not saying that, but for a show that is going to be a hard sell to the general audience, having a lead actor that sort of welcomes you in that way is really a plus. So
Mhm. Yeah, no, she's a fantastic choice. I think it's really inspired casting.
Can Can you tell us a little bit about Maureen?
Sure. Yeah. I think, the biggest thing about Maureen, especially in the first book, is that she is a mysterious character. She doesn't really get any points of views other than one teeny tiny one in the first book. And so you're seeing her from the perspective of other characters who kind of inherently don't trust her. Just because she's an Aes Sedai, because she is a channeler, and because that's not very well known or understood by a lot of people. There's awe of her, but not trust. So you don't really know what's going on in her mind, because she keeps so much below the surface. And Aes Sedai they have a reputation for not being able to lie, but then they also have this reputation that though they tell you the truth, it's not always what you think you're hearing. So that reputation kind of follows them around. And Maureen is very good at that. She's extremely skilled in all ways. Like with the power, she's very skilled politically. And so that's just kind of what makes her so interesting at first, is that you really just don't know what's going on under the surface. And the show might have to play with that a little bit, because they're giving her a little bit more focus up front than she has in the first book. Maybe we'll peek behind the curtains a little bit more into who she is and what's going on with her. But I think that's what makes her fascinating, is that there's the surface Maureen, and then there's these layers underneath, and you come to understand them better over time.
Briefly tell us what Aes Sedai is.
Yeah. So Aes Sedai are female channelers, women of this organization called the White Tower. And so, again, since the breaking, and, men haven't really been able to safely channel, the White Tower is only women. And they're a huge political force throughout the world. And not directly, but they hold so much power in and of themselves that they are said to, influence thrones, and they just wield that kind of power. So they're very highly trained. There are different factions among them called Ajas. So each one has its own kind of particular focus that a woman can choose, depending on where her interests lie. She can choose an Aja and let that kind of guide how she spends her time and her talents.
Right. There's different colors to the order of the women. I remember Maureen, I think, was blue.
She is blue. Yes. Blue. And so, I don't know how much the show is going to reveal about that up front. Like, what in the book, it's kind of like you don't really know what all of the Ajas do. So I don't know if they're making like anything out of that in the show or not. Like, are we going to just know what they all are? It's not really a big secret or anything. Like, it doesn't need to be a secret, but
right.
But we don't know. It's also not something you necessarily need to understand from the get-go either. Like, oh, you need to remember that with what the Gray Aja does. You probably don't.
They also have bodyguards. So tell me about this guy.
Yes.
Thanks to Dragon Mount too for.
Can I just interject right now for people who are like, oh, should I try this show? I don't know. I gather it's not the point in the books, but Rosamund Pike and Daniel Henney have like off the chain chemistry.
I love it.
So there's going to be so much fanfic.
Oh my gosh.
I love it. That's a good sign.
I was actively like disappointed when I was like, oh, that's not going anywhere. Oh, okay.
I knew that was going to
happen. Maybe it does. But yeah. Tell us about their bodyguards, or as they call them, warders. And
right.
Is it? So Aaron called it slavery.
Sure sounds like it how you described it, bro.
Interesting. Okay, so let me see if I can kind of give it a little, like at least more nuance than that. Daniel Henney plays Lan, who is Maureen's warder. And as you said, they are kind of bodyguards, but they are more than that. A warder is magically bonded to an Aes Sedai. So, through the use of the power, a bond is created between these two individuals.
How?
So it's a weave, which is what they call like different uses of the one power. So, the Aes Sedai can manipulate the power in different ways, and each weave has a specific purpose and can do different things. So there's like a weave for healing, and some weaves are very simple, like a simple thread of fire, you can light something on fire, or you can throw fireballs, so some things are very simple and other things are very complicated, like creating a warder bond or healing someone. Those are complex weaves.
It's like a spell, would you say?
Yeah, sure. You could call it a spell, only that kind of makes me think of like an incantation, like you say some words or whatever. And so it's not like that. It's this woman, with her skill manipulating these weaves of the power for specific purposes.
So how does it come about? How do they get chosen?
Okay,
Is there like an agreement? I guess that's what I meant when I said how.
Yes,
Okay.
there is an agreement. So there are actually men who go to the White Tower to train to be warders. Typically that was what, in most cases, what happens. That men go to, who are interested in becoming warders, go to the One Tower and receive training to do so. And then when a woman is raised to Aes Sedai, at that point, if she chooses, she can approach any potential warder and say, I want to bond you as a warder. And if he agrees, then she performs the bonding. There are some Ajas, one Aja who, the Red Aja, does not choose to bond warders as a rule. And no one is required to have a warder. So a sister could always just not have one. And certainly by very, very strong custom, men are asked and would agree. That is the custom.
Is it kind of obviously not a perfect analog, but like knight and squire, where someone is pledged to your cause and to help you in aiding you in your quest, essentially?
There is the pledge. That part is similar.
Like it's not slavery. It's they've agreed to be part of
right.
It. They know what they're signing up for. They train
most of the
for
time.
It.
What's the
Yes,
what's the motivation for somebody to want to do that? Then is
also a good question. So there are benefits to both the Aes Sedai and the warder. Through this bond, they receive benefits, like enhanced endurance, for just as one example. They also gain abilities that help them against the shadow, against the Dark One and the Dark One's forces. So there are lots of benefits. There are some risks to it as well that kind of are a counterbalance. So like if a bond is broken by one or the other dying, it has some pretty bad consequences for the other person. So but yes, it's the things that they have to go into.
Sometimes they marry their warders, though, too, I think, right? Is that correct?
One Aja, the green Aja, sometimes does marry their warders, but that's kind of the only Aja that tends to do that. Otherwise, it is typically a very platonic relationship.
And
It's just because they're really great. Now I have to feel like, what can I say? What can I say? But I would say it's again, like for the general audience, like an early easy hook is going to be those two interacting.
I'm so looking forward to that. And I think that that's kind of really interesting, because chemistry does exist. It doesn't necessarily have to be sexual chemistry, but people should have chemistry with each other, right? If you have this intense,
kind of is, though, like that vibe.
Okay. Yeah. So hey, I haven't seen it yet, so I can't speak to that. But I love that anyway. That there is that chemistry and energy.
There was kind of
these two, really.
Wasn't there between Lan and Moraine kind of a
in the books? No.
Another comparison. No? If anybody's seen Pacific Rim, that people have in the pilot, the Jaegers, right. They got to kind of have that kind of chemistry. It's not sexual, but they have to work really well together in order to be a team.
Two of them did bonk each other in that movie. So.
Well, I'm not. Again, it's just saying you don't have
guys are
to have it,
not
but if you
examples.
do, then super cool. Yeah. Good for you.
But there's there are exceptions to every rule, right? So so generally, Aes Sedai are not flanking their warders, but there are Aes Sedai who absolutely do. So
right.
it's
it wasn't. They can feel each other too, right?
That's reminding me. I should mention that there's there's a mental component to the bond too, so they can feel what the other person's feeling,
like pain or trouble, distress.
They know if the other person
right.
is in pain or whatever emotions they're feeling. So there's all kinds. It's quite complex, but it's a super interesting relationship to explore between these two people.
Right on. And I know if I were to distill it down, I'd say 4 kids from small town have a big world adventure, I guess they've aged them up because you do want it to be more of an adult show so it can compete with the Game of Thrones types. But the 4 kids are this guy, Josh. Josha
It's actually pronounced Yosha.
Yosha
Yeah.
Stradowski plays Rand,
Hmm.
and then you've got Perrin, who's his buddy. Right? Would you say they're four
Oh,
friends?
Yeah. So those are the three, young men that are good friends. Yeah.
And this gal,
And Egwene. Yeah.
right?
It's kind of a special bond with Rand. Not a Warder bond, just to be clear, but
Right. I don't remember. I remember him being fond of her, or maybe possibly in love with her in the books, and her not exactly being in love with him in the books.
In the books, there's sort of like it's kind of informal, but they sort of have this thought of like, well, we're going to marry each other someday. Like they both kind of have that in their minds, and it's sort of expected, but it's not really formal or anything. But so there's something there in the books, but I think it looks like they're developing it more in the show.
Right. Now the four of them, they're sought out by Moraine and her warder Lan,
Yes,
who come to the small village called Emond's Field, I think, if I remember correctly, in the Two Rivers area, which I think is it ruled by Caemlyn? Is that
it's not really ruled at all. I mean, technically, it is part
it's
of
country, out in the country.
Yeah, so it's technically part of Andor, which is
Andor,
Caemlyn is the capital city of Andor. And technically it is part of Andor, but if you like went to someone in the Two Rivers and was like, hey, you're part of Andor, they'd be like, no, we're not. Because we never see they're so far remote in the mountains that they never see any of the Queen's people.
Might be getting into spoilers though, huh?
He's referring to the other character who we haven't mentioned yet, the other major character we haven't mentioned yet, the one who catches up later.
It's a terrible nickname for a character, but you got the Dark One and the one who catches up later.
I'm just going off of Tyrion Dracan's comment here, but because there's another major character that we haven't mentioned yet.
Right. Am I allowed to? Would that be a spoiler if I?
No, I don't think it is. I mean, she's
this gal. Yeah. She's the wisdom of Emond's Field, who's like the youngest wisdom of that area. I think was elected in the book. I want to remember she was like early 20s.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah. She's like a handful of years older than the other characters, maybe. So she's not that much older, but and very young for her role. Yeah.
Right. Right, sort of the village. And Egwene, her father owns the inn in town. Now, there's also Roose Bolton is in this show.
Of course he is. Of course he is.
Great voice on that guy, though.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. He plays Rand's dad, who may or may not have a secret past. And then another thing we didn't mention is that when you were talking about male channelers, they're kind of hunted by the Aes Sedai and are, sought out to be gentled, sort of, or have the one power, the ability to have the one power removed from them, if I remember correctly. Like this guy?
Yes.
Would be this guy, right?
Loghain, who... this is getting into like another concept which we haven't really introduced, but yes, he's a very powerful male channeler, and he also claims to be the Dragon Reborn, which is kind of a big deal.
Right. That's who Moraine's looking for.
Yes. So yes, people are looking for the Dragon Reborn. He says he's the one, and he can channel very powerfully.
Just to be clear, there's not dragons, right? It's just a nickname they give.
No,
yes. The dragon was a name given to very powerful male channeler, who was involved in the breaking. So again, going back 3,000 years, and the Dragon Reborn refers to the idea that this dragon has been reborn. Again, the reincarnation and the cyclical nature of things. And so someone alive today is the Dragon Reborn, and this is a figure of prophecy.
Right.
So
through vision of prophecy, it was discerned that it's the child is growing now, right?
Well, yeah, but by the time the books and the show began, they're not a
Right.
child
They're
anymore.
young men,
But
young
Moraine has
adults.
been looking for them since they were a child.
Right. So it's funny that okay, there's no dragons.
No.
But can you talk to us about? I know this is something Aaron and Sarah will probably find pretty cool, but there are, and I hope they make it look good in the series. But these things called Trollocs, and they're the product of genetic experimentation. I remember in the book they're tall and they're half animal, half human hybrids. Like some of them have
They
bird
showed them in the
heads.
trailers. One of them looks like a minotaur, I think.
Yeah, a lot of them have
bull head,
horns,
pig
yeah.
heads. They're lesser intelligence than humans, but physically stronger. And they also are hunting the dragon, if I remember. I think that they're a product of genetic experimentation from the higher technology age. If I seem to remember, I could be wrong, but
Yeah, no, that's right. And it was in particular one person who was doing this genetic experimentation. We haven't talked about the villains yet. Maybe when we talk about the villains, that becomes relevant. But yeah,
right. And there's also ogres. I think they're like gentle builders, right?
Oh yeah, Ogier. I think. But it does sound like ogre, but it's a different.
Right. Okay.
So
I told you I would mispronounce something.
No, I'm only correcting because people might think it's like I don't know, like Shrek or something.
Yeah.
That is
I
actually
totally
what I
did.
was just picturing.
Yeah.
different kind of creature. But yeah, so an Ogier is an entirely different race of people. And not anything connected to the shadow, not anything with genetic manipulation or anything, not human, but just their own race of intelligent beings. Then we do have one at least Ogier character in the season.
Nice. Yeah, no, there's also like one level higher than Trollocs called Murdral that scared me in the book. It was scary. I don't know if they're in the show, but
they are. Yeah.
Sarah, getting all these terms?
No, I just have like
I know
a
for her
limit
it's a
of,
little
like,
it's overload for her. Yeah.
It's not even as overload. It's like the more that I hear like, and then the Gleepglorps of the Bilderbergs. I'm just like, no.
too many weirdo names. Yeah.
It's probably something you'll get into as it goes along, maybe.
Yeah, and that's kind of the job of the adaptation is to ease into that stuff. Because if you just throw that at everyone right off the top, I guarantee it's going to turn most people off.
Right, but hopefully, we're not having an episode where they're like, okay, well then here's this, thing and that thing and that thing. Yeah, right. So and then you can see it and you kind of understand it in context. So it's not just like a name coming at you. It's like, hey, here's this thing in your face you can see.
Right. So I guess we can talk villains. Of course, you have the Dark One, right? And then his servants, who I think the Dark One was imprisoned at the beginning of time by the Creator.
Right. That's the mythology. Yep. The Creator imprisoned the Dark One at the moment of creation outside of the pattern, so we couldn't touch the pattern.
That's my question. Okay.
Yep.
Right.
And then things went a little haywire there right before the breaking. But he's still imprisoned. But the prison is weakening, and so the Dark One is having more.
Also are imprisoned.
Right. So there were
out 13
in the books there were 13 very powerful channelers. So human beings who were very strong in their ability with the one power, and had sworn themselves to the Dark One. You're going too deep. It goes deeper.
We're killing Sarah accidentally.
Totally. Yeah. So they're imprisoned with the Dark One.
And those the 13 are the dudes, right?
They're men and women.
They're men and women.
Yeah.
Oh, I misunderstood. So, okay, continue. I apologize. I thought that was the ones that were just like the guys went to fight, and then
the guys went to fight them basically. Yeah, and then
Oh, so the guys went to fight the 13 or the Dark Ones and the 13. See, I thought the 13 were the guys that went to fight. So that was my okay. I understand.
So the people who went to fight were the dragon, who was named Luz Theron Telamon, and he had 100 companions, so 100 male channelers who went with him to fight the shadow, and things kind of went wrong. but
Okay, well, where were the women then? Why didn't they go with the 100 dudes?
well, that is a good question, which I'm not
That's
going
what I'm just saying. If you're going to say men ruined everything, where are the women that are supposed to have their backs?
Yeah,
I'm sure there's a logical explanation.
There's
I'm
two sides
sure.
there's two sides to the story, and the women would tell you that if they had gone with them and done their plan, that both halves of the power would have been corrupted, and then everybody would be totally screwed. So that's,
Okay.
yeah. Anyway,
All right. So I mean, I think we touched,
Yeah.
enough of a little bit of background for the show. I wonder how much is going to be in it. I wonder how much they'll change. Like Sarah said, they probably have to change as much. But from what I've seen, gorgeous photography and scenery in the Czech Republic and Slovenia. Can't wait to see that in some of the fantasy rendering worlds that they bring to life. Any last questions for our guests before we sign off? How about Sarah?
Well, so one thing that I keep thinking about is because people have mentioned like the sheer cost of this show. It is not cheap. And I know Amazon literally has all the money in the world to play with. And this streaming, to get a little bit inside baseball on the industry side, it's a loss leader for companies like Amazon. Like they don't really, like they can lose money on the show because they're going to get you on targeted ads. And I guarantee if you watch Wheel of Time, the book recommendations are going to pop up in your Amazon. Like you're going to start seeing that.
For sure.
But I do kind of think like there's 15 books. There is not going to be 15 seasons of this.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
So as someone who is familiar with a story, can you just give like, I'm not saying like be accurate, but like, how do you think they could condense it into something that's feasible, which is probably only going to be 5 or 6 seasons max?
Yeah. So great question. And so from what Rafe Judkins has said, they're ballparking 8 seasons. That's what they have envisioned. That doesn't mean it will be 8, right? Even if they get like the full run from Amazon, they might decide 7, 9, whatever, but it's in the ballpark of 8 that they're hoping for. And I've done a ton of discussion of this on my channel. So because I'm really interested in adaptation and, how things get adapted. So, I mean, we've talked so much about how rich these books are. And there's so many characters and there's all these, different plot lines and so on. I will absolutely say that in the middle of the series, as much as I love it, there are plot lines that go on for too long, that are not as essential, that are not going to make it into the show. So those things are going to be condensed or removed. All those kind of like side plots that go on. And I see some people pointing out in the comments, like he's extremely descriptive. So some of the length of it is like, accomplished just by, hey, we're showing this to you in a second instead of spending a lot of time describing it. But but that's where I really see the bulk of it. I still think they're going to make decisions. So it's not like we're not going to see any changes until we get deep into it. They're planning the whole thing as a whole. They're not saying, okay, we're just adapting book 1 now. They're adapting the whole series. So it's not like we're just taking it by chunks. They're thinking about it from start to finish. But a lot of the condensing is going to come in the middle part of the series, where there's some extra stuff in there that doesn't absolutely have to be to tell the core of the story. And so that's where some of that's going to come from.
Well, I really hope they can stick the ending, because I tell you, the ending is fantastic.
Well, at least it's written.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's the other thing that, could be like a bit of a selling point to anyone who's like coming at this, like, hey, I loved Game of Thrones, but that ending just left me so bitter. The difference here is the ending is written. They know exactly where they're heading from.
And that's a great
beginning.
ending too. I love the ending. So
Yes.
I mean, it's a great. I'm not going to say anything, but Aaron, you got any questions for Rebecca?
No, first of all, thanks. You've been real big help getting it. I mean, I was already pretty excited about it. I didn't know anything about it, but you broke it down pretty simple to where, like I said, somebody who like myself, I don't have any kind of history with it. So I'm actually pretty excited to get into it, and going into it, knowing all of this, I don't know that I could repeat it, but it'll make it a little easier for me to kind of comprehend. So I appreciate you being on here with us.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. This is really fun, because that's kind of one of the things that I love to do, is just kind of, talk to people who are just going to be checking this out. Because there's going to be tons of people like you, Aaron, that are like, checking this out, that aren't going to have any book knowledge, and that's great. I think that's wonderful.
I mean, let's just, this would be my question. It's like, I wonder about, Game of Thrones was filled with a lot of sex. So, I mean, do you think Amazon or the Wheel of Time creators are going to have some like, steamy, erotic to appeal to that audience?
I would say like yes and no. Like, I mean, if you go off of like what is in the books, like there's definitely sex in the books. The difference is really just like Robert Jordan wasn't really interested in like writing sex scenes. So he just did like, like we're going to cut over to the fireplace now or whatever. So he just didn't really write that in any kind of depth, but it's in there. And in a show, you're not going to do that. You're not going to be just like, all right, just cut away now that anything is happening. So I think there'll be more just by the very nature of it being an adaptation that you can see. So you'll that's already in there. You don't need to like create sex that doesn't exist. And then certainly plenty of nudity in the books. A lot of it is actually non-sexual nudity. Like there's tons of non-sexual nudity in the books, which people forget about. So I mean, I think there's already some of that. And I think that like the books are adults, like they're adult books. It just so happens that some of the characters are like on the younger side when the books begin, but they've aged them up a little bit and they're adults, so there's definitely going to be sex. I'm sure there's going to be nudity, and hopefully it's something that happens like organically because it's already there as part of the story, that we don't need to like shoehorn it in or anything. Just there, it's part of it.
Right. I think maybe, I mean, when I first picked up the novels, I thought maybe this might be a young adult series, but then I was quickly, quickly.
And for whatever reason, I had that impression too. Maybe because the main characters looks like Sarah said, kids that look like they're younger. So like maybe that's why in my head that I kind of thought that it was going to be that. But it's good to know that it's not. It's
absolutely not. And I think that you guys are not alone there and sort of having that question of like, is this YA? And it's absolutely not. Certainly in terms of like the violence and the psychological horror, it's up there. Like, this isn't something that I think they can't really shy away from it. Like it's there, it's part of the books. And it's, not for kids.
Groovy.
All right. Well, before we let you go, Rebecca, if you wanted to come back anytime, we would love to have you. We'll be recapping the show. Most likely the same time every Sunday is when it seems we can get together and talk about Wheel of Time. You are welcome to come back. It was awesome.
Well, so much fun.
Thank you so much for coming on, and thank all your fans too for
thanking everybody in the chat room too who interacted. It makes it so much more fun for us as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, I love seeing the comments pop up on the screen. It's great.
Yep. And you can follow us on Twitter and subscribe to the YouTube channel, of course, and follow us on Twitter at Stream Team Show. And we'll be, like I said, recapping the series with Sarah and Aaron. And if you come back, Rebecca, let me know. You're more than welcome to join us anytime.
Thank you guys so much for having me on. It was loads of fun.
You may be messaging me and saying, hey, I really want to talk about episodes 1, 2, and 3 next week. So you just let us know.
Okay.
We'll be glad to have you back. So for Aaron, Sarah, myself, and Rebecca, I want to thank everybody, and we will see you next Sunday. Thanks again.
Mm-hmm.